let's go ahead and move on to the midterms block, because there's a direct tie-in here, which is basically Republicans with the gas prices going down and fewer Americans. Inflation's still the #1 concern, by the way, when pollsters ask, but that number has been steadily ticking downwards in terms of the percentage of Americans who say inflation is their top political issue. Republicans are realizing it's not going to be enough for them, at least not for the red wave that they were originally envisioning. Let's go ahead and put this Washington Post report up on the screen. This was a very interesting report. So the headline here says, GOP seeks midterm reset as inflation, abortion, temper ambitions. Republican Party's hopes for a red wave this November dimmed on flagging fundraising and an emphasis on inflation that has lost some of its potency. Now, the way that you know that this is actually the case is you can see what they're talking about now in their ad campaigns. So back in July, about 1 in every 6 ads mentioned gas prices. In early September, only 1% of GOP ads mentioned gas prices. So you can tell they've switched dramatically in their messaging here in just a few months. Instead, they're focusing on crime. That's become a central message of Republicans. The word has been used in 29% of ads. That's up from about 12% back in July. The NRCC chairman is trying to cast the election as a campaign over security. That ties in immigration, crime, and economic concerns. But, you know, it wasn't that long ago that they really felt all they had to do was say inflation, 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 gas prices, gas prices, gas prices. And that was going to be enough. I mean, that looked like a pretty good bet at the time. And now it just doesn't. It's still the #1 concern. But as abortion increases in terms of its potency in this election, and that obviously very salient on the Democratic side, they are realizing they're going to have to do something else that sort of like aesthetics and saying the word inflation not going to be enough for them.
Yeah, I mean, this is a problem of their own making. When you've got nothing else to talk about, it's like you just run on the greatest hits. And, you know, I've always thought about this with the crime message, which is that it impacts at least us the most who live in the bluest areas. Like, you don't really have much interaction with crime when you live in a suburban area. So really, it's a reflection of like what's happening in a blue city and kind of hoping that people who live in the suburbs are pissed off enough about it in order to vote. Obviously, that could happen, but it's not as much as in your face as when you go to the gas pump or when you go and you have to buy food and your grocery bill is double the price. That's always going to be the issue. You have to get having to motivate someone on what's happening somewhere else as opposed to what's happening directly towards you. That's always going to matter the most. That's why I always thought inflation was the most potent thing that they had. And the problem also remains is the Biden actually did something about it. And they never really gave us anything. You know, look, drill more oil, like, sure, I think that's fine, but they didn't have anything even more actionable. Same whenever it came to food. They didn't really make their case in the same way. The problem they had is they were on the upswing whenever it was forces that were outside of the control. And now the downside, whenever there's forces that are out of your control.
They put themselves completely at the whims of the national mood.
Exactly. You don't want to be at the whims of wherever the national wherever the national winds are going.
And
right?
to be fair to them, in some respects, that's just the nature of being a party out of power.
Right.
Because when you have the presidency and you have the House and you have the Senate, you just have a lot more tools in your control to set the agenda, to set the narrative. I mean, Trump was obviously the best at this of all time, probably, and forcing the media to cover the things that he wanted them to cover. But yeah, when you're the party out of power, that becomes a lot more difficult. And so normally in these midterm elections, when you have a president who not that popular now, even with his little tick up in approval rating, still underwater, still not by historic metrics doing all that well, that should be very fertile national grounds for them. But obviously everything changed with Dobbs in a way that, frankly, I'm surprised how much Dobbs and the overturning of Roe versus Wade really shifted the landscape. And the more that you look at the numbers, the more you see women registering, the more you see young people registering, and obviously the outperformance of Democrats in these special elections. So I would say Republicans, really their prospects peaked about the time Glenn Youngkin was winning the gubernatorial election in the state of Virginia. That was when the national wins were sort of the best for Republicans, where you had crime concerns, I would say, were at their height then.
Yeah, definitely.
You also had COVID school concerns and the lockdown conversation. That was still, extraordinarily potent. That has lost a lot of its potency because schools are open and people are back to normal life. COVID as a priority on the right and the left has completely fallen off.
Collapsed. Right.
So those cultural issues are no longer buoying Republicans. And they're left trying to figure out, okay, well, just saying, hey, the Democrats are terrible, that's not really working out for us anymore, because they have done a few things, because of abortion, because inflation is going down. So what are we going to run on? Kevin McCarthy has been working with Newt Gingrich to come up with some sort of positive GOP agenda that they can announce. He's planning to unveil that in Pittsburgh on September 19th. Axios got a little bit of a peek at some of the things that they're talking about. Let's go ahead and put this up on the screen. And they say, Scoop, McCarthy's commitment to America, rollout. I mean, the sections they've got here, first of all, it's very vague and it's a lot of generalities. These are not the specifics. We'll get the specifics, I guess, on September 19th. But, they have these 4 categories. Number 1, an economy that is strong, focusing specifically on inflation, high gas prices, supply chain issues, and competition with China. McCarthy says members should pledge to, quote, put an end to Build Back Better and eliminate wasteful government spending. So basically deficit cutting. That's, the focus of that one, a little Paul Ryan throwback. A nation that is safe. That's the crime and immigration one. A future that is free. Okay, whatever that means. Make sure every kid in every neighborhood can succeed. Confront big tech and advance free speech. Of course, when they've had an opportunity to confront big tech, they have failed to do that. We'll put that aside. And finally, a government that is accountable. This is the part that they actually will do if they get control, which is all of their oversight efforts, which is, endless investigations into Hunter Biden, Anthony Fauci, January 6th Commission, I can't remember what the other ones were that they were. Oh, Merrick Garland, they wanted to investigate. So all of their various investigations. One thing I did find noteworthy, Saagar, is remember how McCarthy was like, we're totally going to ban stock trading by members.
Yeah.
That's not mentioned here.
Yeah, I mean, this is just boring. This is just standard, very just BS. How many times do we have to watch this? It's like, my least favorite are these fake commitments. And then also every president after the State of the Union is like, we're going to barnstorm the country with this new slogan. And then after 2 months, you don't hear anything about it. It's like, just come on, cut us all a break, please.
I feel like in the modern era, it's even shorter. It's 2 days.
Yeah, you're right.
By the next week, they've moved on.
2 days. It's just pathetic by what's happening to them. At this point, they should just be like, yeah, look, we're banking on the national wins. At the same time, look, with the polls and all that, we should always add the caveat, which is that, I think I'll do something on this tomorrow, which is that all of the polls where things are most enthusiastic for Dems are where the biggest misses for Dems were in 2020. It's possible that things actually haven't changed that much at all.
Yeah,
and that all of the structurals really aren't that different, and that really it's just 2020 all over again, where it's a pretty tight election. I think that's actually, I'd probably put my money
probably
more
the
on
most, it's so important that we say, because part of why we talk about this so much is because there's been such a shift. I mean, we were really looking at massive Republican gains in the House, historic level margins, huge gains in the Senate, definitely taking control, Mitch McConnell back in. And so don't mistake any of this for us saying Democrats are going to romp now and they're going to keep the House and whatever. It's still very likely Republicans win the House. Senate is probably 50-50 in terms of what's going to happen there. But this is just very, very different from what the landscape was looking like previously.
Yeah, that's right.
At the same time, this is funny. So Republicans are now, they are having a lot of trouble in terms of cash shortage. And Trump, with his PAC, they raised a ton of money that they didn't spend, and we'll get into some legal jeopardy over that momentarily. But they're trying to push him to spend his PAC money in these Senate races in particular. Put this up on the screen. Now, of course, so here's the tweet says, news, Republicans want Trump to move his $99 million in PAC money into the Senate races. McConnell, who is not really on speaking terms with Trump, I think, advising Trump-friendly candidates and senators to urge Trump to transfer millions into super PACs supporting GOP candidates. There's been a lot of maneuvering behind the scenes to try to fill the coffers and backstop the fundraising of candidates, Blake Masters in particular, J.D. Vance as well, but the Senate Republican candidates across the board. They have a lot of very inexperienced candidates who have turned out to be extremely poor fundraisers. You have the Rick Scott heading up the Republican senatorial arm that blew through their entire cash haul on trying to build their digital fundraising, which did not work out whatsoever. So they're in desperate straits. McConnell was sort of begging Peter Thiel to get back in the Blake Masters race in particular. That seems to be one where the cash shortage in particular is a big problem. Not a lot of ads reserved for the fall. Mark Kelly has been a prolific fundraiser, the Democrat who's the obvious incumbent there. So this is the latest effort, is like, where can we drum up some cash? Something tells me that Trump is not going to be that receptive to this message.
Yeah, I don't think so. Look, I think it's funny because Trump is the juggernaut, but he just doesn't care about the rest of Republicans, leaving them scrambling. Right now, McConnell and Peter Thiel are like in a standoff on who's going to try and bail out Blake Masters. We'll see how that goes. I think it's outrageous, frankly. Arizona is clearly like a battleground. McConnell, using his status of Masters being former Thiel person, be like, you need to cough up money if you want me to spend anything. At the same time, why should McConnell have all that power in the first place? It shouldn't be that way. Trump is a big part of that too. So, I'm not saying I feel bad. I just think it's funny.
I just find the whole thing hilarious.
Yeah.
And a lot of the reason that they have this lineup of candidates is because of Trump. So it does make sense that they'd be like, hey, these are your people. Right. You are the reason we have this slate of candidates, Dr. Oz in Pennsylvania and Blake Masters, all these people, Herschel Walker, J.D. Vance, those were all the Trump picks. So now that they're struggling in fundraising and struggling in the polls, it makes logical sense that you'd be like, hey, buddy, you're going to support your guys here. But, of course, he doesn't care. So he wants to sit on his cash and do whatever he's going to ultimately do with it. McConnell really in a strong position now, in spite of all the rhetoric out of the primaries about, oh, we're not going to vote for him for leader and whatever. And now Blake Masters having to suck up to him to be able to get the cash to be able to compete in the state. So we'll see how that all goes. Cable news is ripping us apart, dividing the country, making it impossible to function as a society, and making it impossible to know just what is true and what is false. But the good news is they are failing and they know it.
That is why we're building something new, a new mainstream, a healthier one, something more trustworthy, something that we are going to need in one of the most pivotal times in American history. We are building up here for the midterms, for the upcoming presidential election, but we need your help. So if you can help us out by becoming a premium member today at breakingpoints.com, we're trying to change America for the better and the entire world.
So what are you waiting for, guys? Go to breakingpoints.com and sign up and help us build a new mainstream.